Hey everyone, this is Dirty Left Feet with Nial and Caja with our guest Daniel Berrien, like on the periodic table of elements, I think, or close to it anyway. How you doing, Caja? How you doing, Daniel?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
So you've got a channel. I think I linked it down in the description if anyone wants to follow it. Anark, like his name, kind of I think that's a combination of like anarchy and kind of like an archangel, I think. He's got a bigger YouTube channel than us, continues to grow, probably because he does quality content instead of rambling for an hour at a time, which is difficult for people to get into. But which is great stuff. You should definitely check it out. He breaks a lot of stuff down in a lot of detail, and it's useful info. But beyond that, like, what's going on with you, man? It's been a long time.
Oh yeah, I've just been living my life, transitioning between jobs, continuing to make work for the channel, organizing, stuff like that. You know, rambling on Twitter, as everybody can see, of course.
I just look for targets on Twitter and attack.
That's what Twitter's for, isn't it?
And then I say, "Fuck you, you trash," and I block them.
That's it. Boom. That's Twitter in a nutshell. You just did it. You summarized it. Yeah.
I'm glad I'm avoiding Twitter. So
Yeah.
that's what it really is.
I've tried to get Caja on Twitter, but she has not made that dive yet. You know, we'll have to like back her up and protect her when and if she ever participates. But yeah, how's your week been, Caja?
Boring, pretty much. It's nothing to share.
School stuff and video games.
Yeah, I went to the doctor.
Oh, we don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to talk about that. Yeah. But yeah, and I you know, so a story that just came up. I don't know if you saw, but Jimmy Dore is counting on the fact that the left doesn't care about women being harassed, sexually harassed. I don't know if you saw.
I am not, you know, the truth is I've distanced myself so much from the drama of the social democratic engagement with, you know, the parliamentarianism, the electoralism, and all the channels surrounding it. I just know that Jimmy was getting worse when the time I started tuning out to all of that stuff. And it seems like he's making a lot of really bad allies. That's what I can see. But I don't know about this newest controversy. Maybe you should fill me in.
I don't know that the Boogaloo Boys say they're in solidarity with Black Lives Matter.
Well, I mean, I should just trust that, I guess. I mean, when people who are reactionaries tell you what they are, you just trust them. That's what I've learned.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But no, I mean, yeah, no, this thing just came up. So basically, you know, I'm just, I'm always in reaction mode every day because that's just where I get my dopamine. So Jimmy is trying to get out in front of a bunch of sexual harassment things against Anark Kasparian when he was at TYT. Basically, he's like saying, well, I'm going to be accused of constantly sexually harassing Anark Kasparian and asking her where she bought her pants so I could get a pair for my wife and all kinds of these other things. And then like throwing in a bunch of excuses of why that was okay. But it's not really true, or it is kind of true, but it's okay that it's true. Like, yeah.
I mean, honestly, if you've seen Jimmy talk and be a person, it's really not even challenging at all to imagine him saying those sorts of things and being that way, right? Like, I feel like it pretty much exactly fits my perception of who Jimmy Dore is. So I can't say I'm shocked to find out what I'm hearing, but I'm interested to see how he's possibly going to deal with the backlash to that, given that he doesn't seem to ever deal with the backlash to anything very well.
I don't think he's going to have backlash from his community. Like, this is going to like reinforce his like red brownism, right? His like enlightened radical alt-right centrism, right? And all those, the anti-social issue supposed leftism, right? And he's going to get attacked by all the people that are not down with that. And if anything, it may help him. I don't know, right? Unless he has a lawsuit. I don't know. I don't predict, because just like his audience are like cult followers now,
Right?
It's like Trump followers, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what he does. He could say, yeah, and I could grab him by the, and they're like, they'll start coming to his shows with T-shirts. Dork and grab me by my, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, this I remember somebody just a few days ago talking about why this takes place, and I don't remember where I was reading it or hearing about it, but it was like they explained it as, when you have like this huge following, okay, when you start building a massive following to begin with, you're going to have all kinds of different people. But as you proceed forward, if you're one of these like debate bro types, or you can never conceive being wrong, what happens is more and more people leave your follower base, the ones who don't like what you're saying and have a skeptical mind and might actually question you, slowly begin to leave your follower base. And what you remain with is the ones who are the diehards, the ones who have stayed with you as you've had fuck up after fuck up after fuck up, never apologizing, always needing to be right. This is exactly, of course, what like happens with Vosh, for example, right? Like there was a time when Vosh's community was like quite a bit more diverse, but now it's like a cult behind him, basically. Same thing totally happening with Jimmy. These guys can't ever admit they're wrong. They can't, they don't have nuance on these takes. If they think that if they admit they were wrong, then people would just think they were wrong about everything. It would just like question all of their validity. So they never admit they're wrong, and they end up with a little cult behind them.
I think that's the problem. Yeah. We admit we're wrong too much.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
There you go. Just never. You need to get into more arguments and never admit you're wrong. You'll get a cult.
There we go.
Yeah. Where's our cult? We're waiting. Let's just say hi to a couple of the people in the chat here. We have Iridescence, who's first, which is always a big thing on Reddit, being first when a good post came down.
There you go.
We've got Alex Kawa. Hello, Alex. Hello, everybody. Ready for a good show. And Jenna Beck, is a local political activist. Totally, he is so full of himself. I've met him a few times in 2017 and 2018 through Steiner. I think that's Lauren Steiner, who interestingly was a diehard again for Warren when Jimmy was, very not for Warren at all at that time. There was a bit of a switch. I did go see one of his shows. I got invited by Ron Placone for a free show. Mm-hmm. Caja went too. We went down to this little hole in the wall. It wasn't a hole. Well, it was a hole in the wall, but it was a hole in the wall under like a palace, right? So it's in what is that, Studio City or one of those areas in LA that's like super ritzy, right? It looks like it's like a nice part of Vegas or something, right? Like a nice part of what would you call it? A tourist shopping area. And you go to this little hole in the wall, and the joke that sticks with me that he told, after all the other comedians came out, the guy, one of the brownies from Willow was one of the comedians. I don't know if anybody remembers Willow and the two brownies, that is not for you, Daikini, right? Little guys. No.
No,
anyway,
no idea what you're talking about. Well, yeah, we'll just go with
Willow, the bad ripoff of Lord of the Rings before Lord of the Rings. Okay. Anyway, so his joke is that he hit a guy with his car late at night, and he asked the guy if he was okay, and the guy kind of looked like him, like, okay, yeah. And he said, well, sorry. And that was his punchline. And that was the joke. Like, he hit a guy with his car, and he said, well, sorry, like sarcastically. That was the joke.
Like his act wasn't really memorable. Like, I don't even remember it. Yeah, it wasn't like.
No, it was crap. And it gave me this creepy feeling, like, this is somebody who thinks it's funny that he doesn't care about other people, right?
Who is this guy?
Jimmy Dore.
Oh, that was Jimmy. That was Jimmy's joke.
Jimmy Dore. This was a tiny little comedy set with like maybe 15 people in the audience, 20.
Yeah, probably 20-ish.
And you could order food. I ordered 2 coffees, which they probably loved me for, because there was a 2-drink minimum. But that was a long time ago. That's when I thought that door was all right. But yeah, no, he definitely fell off for me. So fuck Dore. Get off of the subject of fucking Jimmy Dore. So you're like you're obviously still hardcore into the anarchism thing, and I think maybe it would be interesting to have somewhat of a dialogue on some of that, because you're obviously very lucid on the subject. Like one of the issues I think that comes up sometimes is like the authoritarian, anti-authoritarian conversation, right? States existing, and what does it mean to not have a state exist? Like statism versus anti-statism. I feel like these are some of the harder points of contention between like socialist types or dem socks or socialist types, lefties, communists, and anarchists. And I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the discussion at hand is basically like, should or should not the state be used, right? And what gets obviously mixed up in that question is, well, how do you even define the state to begin with? Now, the anarchists have taken this very practical approach to defining the state. They just really say exactly what it is, this thing we call a state. What institutions comprise this thing, right? Like it's essentially the laws, it's laws, courts, the police forces, a military. But more than that, it's that all of those bodies are alienated from control by the masses. So the state is essentially a body by which power is centralized and alienated. So there's a huge amount of extraction from the populace. It is then turned around and turned into a power system, which is the state. And that state then imposes itself upon the people, and it imposes an order in that process.
So would you say the critical element is the lack of democratic control of those institutions, or even if they were actually democratically controlled, would that still be an issue?
The problem is that the power does not root back to the people. Okay, so the issue with representative systems, the problems with republics, is that at the end of the day, I don't really get to choose how my power is delegated. I just rubber stamp somebody who rules me. I don't get an option, like, okay, I get to choose between a Democrat and a Republican. And as we all have discussed to death at this point, the difference between them is almost negligible, right? So then really, what do I even get to vote on? I get to vote on almost nothing. And all I'm really doing is rubber stamping somebody who's then going to go on to make all the decisions for me, and for which I have basically no accountability over. Okay, I can't really I can't, recalls are actually super challenging. Once they're in a position of power, they have that power, and it's going to be very, very difficult to take it away from them. And it should be said, they almost no longer need the constituency who got them in the first time, because they have such a huge megaphone, they can just build a new constituency after they're in office. So this ends up with a situation where you have almost no control over the people that you've elected in, and those people don't really represent any of your needs. So the Republic's justification for this is that we are consenting to these people. They're a representation, therefore representatives of our will, right? That's what we're being told. The problem is I never had a conversation about what I was consenting to when I voted for that politician, right? When it comes down to the fact that all I'm doing is voting for the lesser of two evils, then I'm consenting to nothing. I'm literally it's more like I'm being held at gunpoint to choose my ruler. And then I'm choosing the ruler I think is least likely to shoot me, right? Like that's essentially what it boils down to at this point. It has nothing to do with consent. It's literally a mechanism by which we are alienated from power in society, of control of our society. So to me, this is one of the fundamental aspects of the state. So when I ask, is it a state? What I'm asking is, do the people actually have power in their society? Do they have durable power and the ability to revoke any delegation that they could decide to put in place? It's not to say that you should never elect somebody to do a duty. It's just to say that that duty should be determined by a direct democratic mandate. They should be temporary, which is to say only having that power for as long as you have elected them to do a task, and they should be revocable, which is to say you can undelegate them at your whim. So this is anarchism's solution to this problem, but the power always roots back to being directly democratic in anarchism. That is to say, I don't have to delegate anybody. I'm not forced to choose a delegate in order to carry out some aspect of administration in society. The default is that we determine everything, period, at the bottom level. And then if we need delegation, we choose delegation. Whereas in a republic, I mean, there's no way you're ever going to make that into something it's not. It is you choosing your rulers. You don't get to determine what they do or do not do after they are elected.
I don't think the main contention that I've seen has been around republic versus more democracy, or true democracy. The contention, I think, is more so like, well, we might need like an environmental agency to evaluate the impacts of environmental problems and to have kind of a systematic set of ground rules that are kind of consistent, because navigating a world and making a world work where there is no consistency of rule sets may be just far too unmanageable and gameable, right, to actually function. I think that's more like where the people are seeing the divide, not necessarily where they're actually. So it'd be nice to like get to where the divide actually is. Are you very familiar with Michael Albert's Paracon? I think I've brought it up with you before, and would that fit within an anarchist paradigm?
Paracon is explicitly anarchist. Michael Albert is an anarchist. It's It's a model of anarcho-communism. But I think so. The beginning of the process here. So, like what you've described, how we might want to like an environmental protection agency. Well, the thing is that doesn't necessitate a state. To have some group whose job is to make sure that there are environmental regulations upon the actions that people do, and going and making certain that the people that are in a confederation of councils are carrying through on particular regulations, does not require a state. It just requires people to get together and decide to do that task, right? Like you can establish, if you want to call them agencies in anarchism, they would just be councils whose jobs were to assess environmental issues. And those would be directly democratic bodies of the people, instead of them being appointed by a representative who appoints somebody and then, like 2 layers up, that appointed person gets to determine everything about our environmental policy. Instead, it would be us determining our own environmental policy.
Right. I think the issue there gets to the point of like, if it's direct democracy where everyone's voting on everything, or everyone who wants to vote, or whatever it is, there's so much minutia that really like little interest groups really would wind up taking over every issue, unless there is some kind of delegation of responsibility of decision making to a larger body whose job it is to like have specialty in those areas, right? Like, I don't know if I necessarily like, so are we going to store the nuclear waste under the mountain? Or are we going to bury it in concrete? And like just put it to a referendum vote, right? Maybe that's good. Maybe that's not. Maybe somebody says, well, vaccines kill people, so we should just ban vaccines, and like some dumb ideas come up. I'm not necessarily in favor of the idea that the population would just be taken over by dumb people, since that's kind of a reactionary take. But I guess my main point is not so much that. It is just kind of like, at a certain level, we would all be spending all of our time participating in the democracy and have no time for anything else. And even then, we still wouldn't have enough time to make all those decisions that need to be made, the smaller decisions, the medium decisions, the larger decisions. I think, however practical, the larger decisions could be directly democratic. Are we gonna do the mountaintop removal on that mountain because we really want the lithium that's in there, or cobalt, or whatever it is? Or are we gonna mine it in a tunnel kind of fashion, old school, or are we just not going to do it and do without? Like, maybe that's a big enough like singular decision that it's easy enough to put it to a vote. But like, it seems like some hierarchy, and I know anarchism is very anti-hierarchy, but delegating authority creates hierarchies, right? So in that sense, those are hierarchies that would have to justify themselves and be transparent. And if the people wanted to choose on something, I think they should have an avenue to like first know what's going on if they want to know, and then being able to choose, right? Basically being able to say, hey, we want to make a choice on this, right? We don't want this decided by the delegate that we sent. We're not necessarily totally opposed to the delegate. They seem like a nice person, competent, but we want to choose. Does that sound like it fits within anarchism? Because some of that feels like some people would still call that a state, a collection of all these delegated institutions that manage all kinds of different things that frankly need to be managed in a worldwide system, right, of trade and exchange and all these kinds of things.
Well, okay, so I think they're kind of like two separate things you were talking about. Number one is like, how do you deal with like environmental issues? Like that was kind of the first thing. Like, how are you gonna deal with that problem? And one thing I should say is one of the fundamental principles in anarchism is those who are affected decide, right? So you end up with the situation where it's like, okay, everybody gets together and wants to have a talk about where they're going to put the nuclear waste. Okay, well, any place they could choose to put it, the people who are in that place would then have a say in whether that nuclear waste was put in the place they live, right? So that means that there is no way that it could be done in such a way where it's going to be like nuclear waste is just transplanted into a community against their will, because as soon as the idea arises that the nuclear waste will be put in a place, that council gets involved immediately and they become part of the process of determining what's actually going to happen. Might also be said that nuclear waste specifically affects a very large group of people. And I would say outside of the group of the places that even the nuclear waste is being produced and disposed, because nuclear waste lasts so long that it's actually going to be something that affects society at large. And it's quite possible that that would turn into something that would need a much broader referendum to determine. Now, here's the thing. A lot of this stuff, as you say, it's like the nitty gritty of doing these things every single day is sort of ridiculous to expect everybody to do. There's going to be some amount of delegation. And anarchism doesn't mean no rules. It just means that the rules have to be determined by us and are contingent upon our decision. So we can pass rules. We can determine that we want, quote unquote, environmental regulations. It's just that those are under our democratic mandate. We get to put them in place, edit them, and decide upon them as per whoever is affected by the decisions, engaging in the process of consensus together. Instead of, us ending up with the EPA, which becomes a failure point. Because look at the system we've got. What ends up happening is you've got this EPA, but because the EPA is actually under control of people you've elected, and because you have no power over anything that those elected people really do, then that means that it's just kind of up to the whims of whoever gets into office what happens to our EPA. Whereas in the system that I'm discussing, that EPA is never going to get gutted until the people decide they want to gut it. And that's like going to be a way bigger thing. It's going to be harder to convince the entire population it wants to poison itself with nuclear waste than it is for Trump to get into office, destroy the EPA, and nuclear waste to just be, discarded into somebody's community against their will, which we've seen happen. But that's one thing. The other thing is you're talking about delegation. And I think the problem is with making delegation standardized and permanent as we do. Okay, so recall elections, people talk about how technically there are recall elections. Yeah, technically there are recall elections. They really just don't do much in the system. Okay, like in many places there aren't recall elections. And in many of the places they are, they're just pretty much a dead affair. It's very difficult to use them effectively. It's hard to mobilize people to get back out and vote for an election. They already don't vote in most of these elections. And to get them to come out and vote in an election to recall a guy that everybody already voted on is even harder. Okay, so it just becomes a very cumbersome and ineffective mechanism within the system we've got. Whereas in delegation, there would be a constant process of sort of verifying your mandate, right? You would be in the action of seeing whether the people are doing the acts. And because you're in a constant democratic process, you'd be determining whether you would like that person to consider delegation, which is sort of exactly what you were suggesting. So what I will say is that process of delegation is one of the main ways that you're avoiding this life spent completely in the councils. And it shouldn't be. Here's another thing I want to say, though. Okay, I'm not trying to pretend that an anarchist society is a pure utopia. I'm only saying it's a society built with the least number of failure points for like power parasites to take over, and is a society that meets our liberatory needs as a people, that it fits with our inherent, human nature to desire freedom, to desire control over our lives, to not desire to be alienated or subjugated or put under somebody else's foot, right? And anarchism is the society that gives us all of the tools to resist those things. It's a society that allows us to determine how our future will go. Another way you might look at it is anarchism is the system by which we attempt to eliminate all of the hierarchies to the maximal degree, the hierarchies of power, so that we can determine what it is that we actually want from our future, that we can finally develop an organic consensus, not one that is forced upon us by power structures, but ones we have arrived at because it is the actual will of the people as per the process of consensus.
I imagine if it was put up to a vote, should the Fed manipulate interest rates and monetary supply in order to enforce a very specific rate of unemployment or lack of participation in the economy?
Yeah, right.
Do we actually want them to do that instead of, or do we not want them to try to encourage maximal participation instead, which, by the way, raises wages, which is why they're against doing that. That's why they want a certain amount of unemployment. And so whenever some politician is out there, bemoaning unemployment and people that don't have jobs, those people are designed into the system, and all these people rubber stamp that happening at the top. They're just not going to tell you that, right? Mm-hmm. But if that was put to a vote, my imagination is that people would be like, no, fuck you. Yeah, we want everyone.
No, I don't want unemployment. Yeah, exactly.
Do you want? Yeah. Do you want us to encourage unemployment? No. Check.
Right.
So that's clearly an example of where the people's will is not being exercised, and it's being obfuscated behind institutions and systems of power. I want to get to some of the audience's questions. Caja, do you have any questions? As I know I'm a little more deep into this, but maybe you would have a way of approaching it.
No, I just find it really interesting because I don't know that much about anarchism, so I'm just kind of listening right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still I had anarchist friends when I was growing up, but I was mostly drunk and high all the time, and eventually I lost track of those groups. Let's say you don't have a question about maybe how something would work.
I know it's a stereotype. I was just thinking a stereotype, and I knew it was a stereotype that it's a system with no rules, right? But it's not what you're saying. There's still rules to follow, and there's still structure. It's just more of the power is with the people and not with a few individuals, basically.
Do you maybe have a question about how the rules might be structured, like the scope of their effect or things like that, or an example, a specific policy area, how would this work under anarchism?
Well, I was just thinking certain things take you want experts in that, right? You don't want just anyone in it. Let's say you're talking about healthcare, right? You don't want just regular people making decisions, like when you said the vaccines, right? You want people that actually have medical knowledge on this and how it actually works, right? So that was, I guess, I don't know how I would put that into a question. How would you regulate that? How would you enforce that? I guess.
So how do we make sure?
We both have kind of gotten at the same sort of question, which is how do you deal with this idea of the hierarchy of expertise, right? What do you do about this hierarchy of expertise? Well, one thing that should be said is that this has sort of been addressed historically by anarchists in a discussion about the differences between authority, expertise, because just because someone else, it should be said, is good at something doesn't mean that they are above you in a hierarchy, right? Everybody's just gonna be good and bad at different things. That doesn't mean that there's a hierarchy between you, right? It's not as if because I'm a good artist, I'm above you who is a good cook, right? Those things are not commensurate. They're different things that require different aspects and are useful to society in different ways. So they're not commensurate in that way. We shouldn't be comparing them. And it's not to say that a society that rejects hierarchy of power also rejects hierarchy of. Sorry, getting a call.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh, sorry. Give me a sec.
Yep, no problem. Let me read I'm just sharing the live link in our in Twitter to a couple DM groups here. I want to get to some of the questions in the comments section, because that's going to be an interesting place. Things that I don't think about.
Sorry, I just had to respond to the text and everything. I'll just finish what I was saying. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
So, expertise does not have to mean hierarchy of power. Now, there's some kind of implied hierarchy of power insofar as that they're going to be given respect, and perhaps that respect might allow them to move in society in a way that gives them more power than others, right? I'm not saying that we can actually eliminate every hierarchy of power. I'm saying we should be trying to build a system where hierarchies of power are diminished. Delegation is not necessarily a recognition that person should have more power than me. It's a recognition that that person has a specific kind of knowledge or skill that I do not have, and that I value the skill that they have. So Bookchin actually gets at this when he says that we should move from this hierarchical conception of comparison and competition and get instead to a concept of unity and diversity and complementarity. So he says these are the principles that will govern a horizontal society. That things are complementary, that we don't have to be comparing them. We can understand that they work together in many different ways. And we can understand that diversity is not actually a hierarchicalizing process, that in fact it is something that creates a broader new program, a new unity upon this aspect of diversity. So I would recommend, just insofar as those ideas are concerned, you could read like Bakunin responding to On Authority by Engels. You could read Bookchin and Ecology of Freedom and things like that. But that's generally how I'd respond to that.
Do you know if a lot of those materials are free online?
Oh yeah, totally. Anything that was written of anarchists, about anarchists, by anarchists, it's pretty much all on either LibCom or Anarchist Library for free. So.
Okay, cool. Did you have a question?
Actually, can you turn the light down a little bit?
Oh, sure.
My eyes.
We're just a little dim. Which one?
I don't know. The last one you did hurt my eyes.
That one. That totally. Okay. This one. Is that better?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. Sorry. This is probably better light anyway. It's actually too bright. So yeah, let me get to a couple of the questions here, which have aged now. How do you get there? How do you enforce that? Okay, so an enforcement of rules, we say this is a protected environmental area. The population of centaurs that have just evolved are very vulnerable, and we don't want anyone to go there and meddle with them. And this is a protected area. You're not allowed to go there for 20 years while they build up their population and their health. How would you enforce that? So is enforcement anti-anarchist, or is it not? I guess
it depends on the kind of enforcement, right? Like I would say, it's not that there will be no body of violence in this society. It's that a body of violence is really not going to be the mechanism by which people are going to be treated, right? Like, we should be trying to build a rehabilitative system. Like, if you really want to deal with the problems you've got, you should be trying to figure out how to actually solve the problems at hand, and how to, condition people's behaviors as to stop doing them. I think there's a fundamental assumption that takes place because of hierarchical society always having these militaries and these militarized officers that stand over us and always are threatening us with violence. Essentially, we then have been told this is the reason we do everything. The reason you act, the reason you follow every single rule is because if you didn't, the police would shoot you, or the military would stop you from doing the broader program you're doing. But I think that one of the fundamental aspects in anarchism is that that's just not actually true about how people act. People follow most rules because they just agree with the rules, right? Like, I don't not murder because I'm at threat of violence. I don't murder because I don't want to murder. There's just a lot of reasons I'm not going to carry out murder, right? Now, there's also situations, obviously, where people are going to do things that are not good for the rest of society. And insofar as that takes place, there probably will be some rules about like, oh, here's our precedent for how this works, and this is the way we maybe think we would act again. In fact, in old indigenous societies, precedent had a lot to do with how the rules were set. But there's also going to be some aspect of adaptability to circumstance. This kind of also comes back to Bookchin. Going against this idea that justice is like blind and blindfolded and cannot conceive the difference in any person. This is a very like bourgeois notion of justice, that true justice is equality. And it's like, well, why aren't we taking into account like the complex circumstances that lead to all of these problems? Like a very rich person murdering someone and a very poor person murdering someone, contrary to how everything is structured, it should be instead that you would imagine the rich person should be punished really bad because they have all this power and they're abusing it. And the poor person is the one who should get the lighter punishment. But the way hierarchical society works, that's all completely backwards. And it's because of this desire to like protect everybody equally when society really doesn't meet that standard at all. So there's a really long, you'll see these answers are long because they require us to think about what the actual roots of the issues are. Why do these things happen?
I mean, I guess at some point, though, is there like, a glass case somewhere that says in case of asshole break glass that has a shotgun in it or a tranquilizing gun in it, because somebody's going to be like, this used to be America, and I'm going to go after this group of people that I think ruined, some reactionary assholes. Oh, yeah. I mean, we're going to have those people at least for a couple generations afterward, and like terrorist groups and such.
Maybe forever.
Yeah,
maybe forever.
And we're gonna have to deal with them. We can't be like, we'd really prefer you not put the bomb in the school bus.
Right. Yeah, no, of course.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's the thing is anarchists are also not nonviolent. The opposition to the state is not opposition to the use of force. The problem with the state is not that it uses force. It's that the force that it uses is completely alienated from control by the masses. And the anarchists pretty much just advocate a confederation of militias for this. And the militias are controlled by the communities. That's really the difference, right? As opposed to an army, which is centralized and is going to be controlled by the thing at the very top of the pyramid. In anarchist society, militias would be parts of the council confederations. Essentially, you'd have all these democratic bodies met together would have different levels of control over different militias at different sizes. You might imagine like your smallest militia body would be like in your locality. You'd just locally have a militia, and it would, if you guys were in danger, defend you guys, and it would be you. That it should be said, not like a professional police, but like your population by sortition actually being put into these positions, doing them as part of your life as a democratic society. And then as you get bigger, you might imagine that you join together all of the militias inside of that. And as you get bigger than that, you join all of the militias together inside of that. And the councils at those levels make decisions about the militias at those sizes, right? And this is all laid out in my video after the revolution, which was very purposely created to answer questions just like these. And it's got all kinds of nice little visuals and descriptions of how all of this would be structured and in a much more mechanical way than most anarchists are gonna venture to give you.
I think, the bringing up of militias, which I think is an area where some people are going to have some pause, obviously, given the current circumstance. Because as it happens, I mean, obviously, I think democratic control of force is critical. So I suppose we call that a militia. And by sortition, you mean a draft, essentially, right? So, I mean, that's...
Not necessarily. So, like, for example, we can look at Rojava right now, or the Zapatistas. Both of them are kind of doing a similar thing on this front. The idea is that in reality, like your police, like what we think of as your police, that really doesn't need to be like a professional job in a general sense. Like you can actually just sort people in your community into that role through a democratic process. So like Rojava has these I'm not even talking about the People's Protection Units, which are militias. I'm talking about actual like domestic, conflict resolution and stuff like that. They have these groups that are essentially people in the community are being sorted through them. It's like there's like a flow of delegation of people being put into these protection units. And of course, obviously you have some process by which some people can't be put on them for good reasons. But like there are solutions to this problem that don't look like conscription into a military body, right?
Yeah, when you said sortition, I just the term sortition I think means random selection, but
that's how the Zapatistas do it. Rojava does it through delegation. Zapatistas do it through literal sortition, to my knowledge.
Right, and I would think that you wouldn't want people in those roles permanently. Like it'd be like a temporary position,
right?
Like
rotation.
This is kind of like your military service to serve the community, because I think the longer you have someone in a position of violence as your career, right, or enforcement of force as your career, the more likely of the militias want to take over, right? And my other concern obviously would be that right now in the United States, and I mean the United States is kind of probably the main area. Other countries, I don't know what they have that's really comparable. The people participating in what we call militias today are all the right-wing, reactionary, fascistic kind of organizations, right? I mean, there's some small number of maybe left militias, but to my knowledge, it's a very small minority. And I think people would understandably be concerned, like, is this really, could this be easily manipulated? The rhetoric be manipulated in to get people to endorse something like the Boogaloo Boys, right?
Yeah, well, I think the misunderstanding here is in thinking that these are like militias as we currently have them. Like, these militias are all going to be under direct democratic control. So that is to say, what the militias do is determined by the councils of that area. Because remember, it literally is the people of that area, right? Like it literally is the people of that area on the council, and it literally is the people of that area in the militia. So then you're in this situation where it's like, well, all these problems you got about militias are mostly problems about how, like, small private militias function in our society and how they become reactionary. But in the situation we're thinking of, where it's like, you have this militia that, if we're paralleling it to the reactionary militias in our society, this militia is like racist and wants to go to like do lynchings or something. Well, the problem is that they are under direct democratic control by the locality, and therefore the person they want to go lynch is also has democratic control within that society. They also have the ability to veto things. They can also revoke delegation. They delegated people into those spots to begin with. Remember, that's the point. That militia had to be delegated by the people who were there. So it's not to say like, oh, okay, that's going to solve every problem. It should just be said that there's going to be like a strong impetus for people that are in an area where if there is racism, let's say that's still a problem after we destroy the previous hierarchical society. Let's say we've still got racist tendencies. Well, then why would the black person that's being, hunted by white militias delegate racists that were going to start a lynch mob into the militias? You would imagine they just would never have allowed them to get appointed to begin with. They never would have given their consent to that person being delegated into the militia, given that that's a fear that they might have. Now, I'm not saying that would never happen. It could. Right? Like, it's possible it could happen, but it should be said, insofar as that they violate the rules of establishing hierarchies of power and, very clearly trying to bring back reactionary stances, well, they're part of a larger council confederation. Remember, right? They're part of a bigger bodies as well. They're part of regional bodies. They're part of like entire like unified autonomous bodies. They're going to be held accountable by everybody else in society as well. So it's like, oh, next door, you've got a reactionary militia that just tried to lynch the 3 black people in your community. Well, what do you think the people next door are going to think about that? You think they're going to want you to continue being part of their confederation? And then if you're not part of the confederation, it's essentially like economic sanctions of a sort. It's like, well, now you don't have any access to democratic control of anything within your region or in the broader autonomous confederation. You've essentially been kicked out. And you're on your own. You're essentially now a small reactionary militia that violated democratic consent and is probably not going to be seen very well by surrounding democratic horizontal society, right?
So economic sanctions, like
I mean, that's one aspect.
Yeah.
But it's also like there's probably all kinds of things that could happen beforehand, before this all gets out of control, because those councils are going to be part of a bigger confederated body and therefore are going to be in interaction with the rest of a democratic society, right? So the chances that out of nowhere, nobody expected it to happen, a militia somehow got turned into a lynch squad and decided to go lynch somebody, and nobody in the broader confederation had any idea it was going to happen. That is a situation where you might end up being in, there might be some delivery of a democratic impulse. We are telling you guys you have to stop, or the consequences will be X. We are going to kick you from the confederation, or, if not kick you from the confederation, we are going to, not going to prefer you for distribution. Or there's a variety of different approaches that can be taken, including mediation processes that might be able to deal with the problem before it gets bad. But if it does get bad, this society deals with it in the same way that a reaction, that in almost any other society would deal with a reactionary coup. Get out the guns and defend yourself from the fascists who are rising up in your midst, right? Like, this society actually has the power to do it as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's no polite way to deal with fascists.
No. Yeah. And horizontalism doesn't mean we give up all our power. It means power is distributed. Power is no longer hierarchicalized. It's not parasitized. It's not taken away from us. It now belongs to us, and we are the default of power. I give delegation away temporarily, and I take it back at my whim, right? So that's the way the society is fundamentally supposed to function.
Caja, you have any?
I was thinking, are there any like real world examples of this?
Rojava, I think, and what did you say? The Sandinistas are kind of anarchists,
or the Zapatistas. There's actually, I've made a big list of both modern and historical autonomies and movements. So that is to say, when I say autonomy, I mean a region functioning to some significant degree on the principles that I'm discussing. And when I say a movement, I just mean people that are advocating for these ideas. And I can link it to people, but just some of the current existing autonomies that function like this. You've got Rojava in Syria, the Zapatistas, Barbacha in Algeria, the Cisola in Venezuela, the Fejuve in Bolivia, the Marinaleda. Like, the list is relatively long.
And I haven't heard of most of these, which kind of tells me something about
they don't want you to know.
Well, it's not; these aren't useful examples either for the right wing or reactionaries for some reason. It'd be interesting to look at each of them and to think about or learn about their individual aspects, tendencies. Let's go. We had a question earlier from Alex. Speaking of environmentalism, do you think it's worth it to change our behaviors to mitigate climate change? For example, going vegan when we know the impact will be next to meaningless. Well, I will say, anarchists have a very strong vegan tendency, as far as I have.
Forced me to be vegan. No.
Caja's not on board with the vegan thing. Of course,
if other people want to be, I don't care.
Of course, I have objections to some of the math that they've done on the environmental impact and the cycle of life. What's the circle? What's the thing in the Lion King?
Get us the cycle away from
right. But I mean, obviously, I do think that it's worthwhile not to be like an egregious asshole who's like, just not caring about the impact they have and not taking that into consideration with the things that one does. I think it's difficult, given our hierarchical society and our dependence upon the hierarchical economic structures, to behave in a fully responsible manner without completely sabotaging your own quality of life and that of your your family. I don't know if you have further comments on this.
Yeah. I mean, I generally am. I do not think that there's a whole lot of usefulness to what you might call lifestyle politics, which is where you see your personal life and your consumption decisions and things like that as like like a locus of transformative political action, right? I'm not saying that a boycott can't have power, but it needs to be way bigger than just an individual boycott. Systems don't know why you're boycotting anything. So the vegan movement is an example of a more concerted boycott, because at least they know why the boycott is taking place. They know why their sales for those things are going down, and that's why we're getting them making a lot of these meat substitutes. But I would say, in a general sense, like if you actually believe in this like animal liberation perspective, I don't think veganism is the way to achieve it. I don't think the outcome of not eating meat is actually ever going to convince the industries to do the right thing. What you're going to see is it's going to shift resources around. Really, meat production has not fallen a whole lot, even as veganism has gone up. But what I would prefer to see is direct action, right? Which I'm not going to advocate illegal actions, but I'm an anarchist, so you can fill in the blanks. Direct action is what I think you should be doing if you actually want to overthrow the system that is leading to the exploitation of animals, not just a lifestyle decision to eat less or something. You know, this is to me like saying, because you're anti-capitalist, you know, don't buy t-shirts from Walmart, because t-shirts from Walmart are made off the exploitation of children in sweatshops in China. And it's like, fair enough, true, right? But do you really think that you not buying t-shirts from Walmart is going to lead Walmart to not do it that way?
Come on, Daniel. I need you to spend $150 per outfit at least. You know,
I'm not even advocating you shop at Walmart, right? If a boycott for Walmart happened and it was a wide scale organized boycott, I'd probably join in. I just don't think that lifestyle politics is how progressive change or how revolutionary change takes place.
What I tell people is shop at secondhand stores. That way the sin of buying the exploited labor clothing product is on someone else's shoulders, right? It's not yours. They bought it from Walmart that exploited the worker, and then you just bought it secondhand instead of buying something new. So you're fine. You're not participating. It's not true exactly, but you are still contributing to the market. But I mean, I think that's, as far as like buying used, I think is probably out of the options of just becoming a nudist and going to jail. I think that's probably high on your list of like ways you could sustainably. You could also go like medieval and just have like one outfit that you wash over and over again. Right? Yeah.
Right. Two, because you need an outfit to be dressed in while you wash.
Right. Yeah.
At least two.
Yeah, no, I just don't think that the locus of political action is individual action. I think it's action of large concerted large groups with a concerted goal. So if you can carry out your boycott with a large number of people, then yeah, okay. But the actual political process of transformation comes from reclaiming our alienated power by building the power for the masses, essentially trying to create these construct these horizontal structures which actually prefigure the society we're seeking to create, so that we actually have a system to fight back with. So because I guess one of the fundamental cruxes here is just that it's a systems conflict, not a moral battle, right? It's like, I'm not going to convince capitalism to stop being exploitative. I need to figure out how to create a systems conflict with capitalism. So I need to create the system that can go to war with capitalism.
Right. You need power to fight power.
Exactly. And veganism doesn't build any power. Now, if you were to start creating, groups that go do direct action, and those were functioning on councils, and those were building their own dual power through a variety of methods, well, that's feasible, and I find that consistent with an animal liberation perspective, but I don't think veganism is that, right? I don't think it doesn't represent the building of dual power at all. It's essentially a very large concerted boycott.
Yeah, and there is a gradation of animal cruelty, right? there are people now advocating. So there's like the really bad places which we should shut down and reform, and then on the other end there's like people eating crickets, and there will be obviously people like, look what you're doing to those crickets, right? And it's like, okay, well, I mean, we gotta figure out the resources. And that actually I saw like on the mainstream news they were like cicada recipes, right? And stuff like that. So they're moving in this direction where they're going to want to use more insects, and I'm interested in looking more into the health impacts of people eating bugs.
I think there are like a lot of nutrition in exoskeletons.
Well, and I think they're also very related to like shrimp and stuff, like stuff in the ocean that's I mean, not a 1-to-1, but it would be interesting to look at. Obviously it's really easy to produce a whole lot of insect mass with a very small amount of input, which could be helpful. But I mean, all these things have to be looked at one at a time. Let's see. Iridescent says, highly recommend Zoe Baker, Saint Andrewism, any of Murray Bookchin's books. Bookchin's books is a good.
I should mention that's the second time she's come up. That is actually my partner.
Oh, okay.
Iris. Yeah.
Cool. Iridescence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Iridescence. Correct. Yeah.
I like that name. It's pretty.
Yeah.
And I agree with her, Zoe Baker. Yeah, 100%.
I agree. Appointments should go away. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when 100 corporations are responsible for 71% of carbon emissions, should we even bother changing our behaviors when we know we'll barely make a dent just to set an example? I think it's worth engaging in alternatives to the extent that it's feasible, and it helps kind of push things. I'm not, but I'm absolutely against the idea that, like when we were going to the Unitarian Universalist Church locally here, like when was that? Like 10 years ago?
You think Grayson? No,
Charlie was a little girl.
Grayson
still
was just born, so that was 6-ish years ago.
Okay, so like 6 years ago. Seems like so much time has passed. Even though like the last 4 months have just gone whoosh. Like we've done this show together for like 4 months now. But they had these like environmental meetings, and they had all these booklets and things that were probably produced by the fucking Koch brothers about like measuring your own personal carbon footprint. And like you're supposed to like tabulate, like, this is my carbon footprint and I should reduce my carbon sin, basically, right? And if anybody knows Unitarian Universalist Church, you can be any religion you want, basically. You can be an atheist too, but it does have like a very kind of like Protestant kind of religious service structure that fits into that, though they tend to read from like Buddhism or everything else too. But there's a pastor or a priest at the head. They may have a specific religious background. It's often a Judeo-Christian background, and they'll conduct a service. You'll have a choir, But like these meetings, and I was like, hey guys, and there's all these old gray hairs, right? And I'm like, we ended up leaving them because of a fight about. They were like having a fight about whether to fly the rainbow flag. Like that was a difficult decision for them. And I'm like, this is all interesting, but I think we're kind of focusing a little bit too much on our own personal carbon footprint. Maybe we should organize politically and try to like change something in politics, because that can change large things, right? Instead of just us half dozen people slightly doing better. And they didn't want to hear any of that, right? They were just very focused on feeling righteous in reducing their own carbon sin. And, but I was just the new guy too. So like, they're probably like, who's this asshole? Right.
But I agree with you. I think this is a good example. Like this is what capitalism seeks to do.
I've heard of those programs and those books, the carbon footprint stuff, being sponsored by the Koch brothers.
Exactly. Like this is what a capitalist society wants us to do, is to focus on in ourselves. We're the problem, right? Like, I mean, as he said, 71% of emissions are by corporations, and we're over here complaining about the populace who is just trying to live under exploitation and extraction, and we're getting angry at them for driving their cars too much or going on airplanes, where it's like ridiculous. the way that society is structured is the problem, not that people are just seeking to live within the society that you gave them. They don't need to be ascetic monks to live down the sin you have placed on their backs, right? The reason they're forced to live this way is because you guys structured society this way. Why are you asking them to deprive themselves?
Right. It's like, and they took out all the bike paths, and they took out the sidewalks, and they took out all the ways to cross over a freeway or to get from point A to point B without getting on a freeway. And they got rid of the public transportation. You know, they've done all these things to make it so like if you apply for a job and you're like, most jobs, like, do you have your own personal transportation? And if you check no, good luck with that shit. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Like, I'm going to ride my bike to work. You know, it's only 10 miles away. You know, you come in sweaty every day. Come on.
Totally.
Let's see. I already did that one. It might. Okay. So, all right. We already answered that one. What do you say to people who say that nuclear energy is the only way we're ever going to get off of fossil fuels? I'm not a fan of nuclear energy at all. I don't know what your take is, Daniel.
I'm not like as anti-nuclear energy as most other people, and that's probably because I got a physics degree, so I know how it all actually works.
You got indoctrinated.
Yeah, I got indoctrinated. That's what happened. I got indoctrinated by big nuclear. That's what happened. It was particle physics. That is very close to nuclear physics. So yeah, no. But like after I understand how the process works, I understand that it's actually a very safe way to generate energy. The problem is waste disposal. That's really the issue. Modern reactors don't melt down pretty much. Like the last reactor we have as an example is Fukushima, and that was second generation. We don't build second generation reactors anymore, so it's really not an issue. Third generation reactors pretty much don't melt down, and in fact, they're built in such a way it's almost literally impossible for them to melt down. So then the problem is waste disposal.
Yeah.
Waste disposal is the issue.
Like a big earthquake or something, like what happened in Japan, like that.
Well, that was second generation.
The second generation ones, that's a problem because if your electricity goes off, then you have an issue. But a lot of these third generation ones, there is a passive chemical process that's taking place such that even if the electricity were cut off to the entire reactor, it would still go through a process of cooling down all of the rods, and it would diffuse the process of meltdown. So it actually, when I said they're almost literally unable to melt down because just the chemical processes they've put in place in third generation reactors makes it almost literally impossible.
Do you have a sense of like how long it takes for you to actually get a carbon emissions return on those? Because
no, I won't pretend to know the answer to that. I don't know.
Right. So that's a critical element, right? Like, because they talk about we need to build all these new nuclear reactors. And my understanding is it takes like 15 years to get your investment back in energy, at least, right? We don't have 15 years. And now you're spending all this upfront money or resources and emitting carbon to put all that concrete down, do the construction, refine the nuclear materials, to have it pay off like a mortgage does 20 years later. Like, we don't have 20 years. Like, we need stuff that's going to switch over and start giving us a return right away, or we can just forget it, in my opinion.
The same thing is true to some degree of solar panels. Solar panels also take some considerable amount of time to pay off. They also take an extraordinary amount of rare mineral extraction. And I'm not against solar panels. I'm not trying to say nuclear is better than solar panels. I actually think I would prefer if we went that direction and improved our technology. But also the solar panels have many of those same problems. So we're going to have to make some big upfront investment. That's just part of the process. We're going to have to dump a bunch of money into it. That's why scientists keep saying things like it's going to require the amount of mobilization as World War II, is because that's what happened in World War II, right? We invested an absolutely enormous amount of resources up front. And then, of course, we pillaged a bunch of them afterwards in order to make it back. But that's neither here nor there. There was an enormous amount of upfront investment that had to take place. And that's very much like what's going to have to happen here. We may not see the payoff for that investment until well after the period of time of the threshold has passed. We're just trying to live as best we can. Now, what I'm saying is I'm not against nuclear energy in a more general sense. I think that its fundamental problem is waste disposal. And that is a real problem, but it's not literally unsolvable. So I am not anti-nuclear, but I would prefer solar panels.
We can just start shooting it into space and hope none of the rockets
That's what some people say. Yeah.
Just hoping none of the rockets explode.
Yeah.
There's going to be a hard trade-off on the how much rocket fuel you got to spend to get those barrels out into space. Yeah. But, whatever.
I have a little bit of an issue with forever contaminants, radiation having 10 million years later when we're, four-armed flying insectoids, finally the radiation won't be a problem anymore. But it's, I got a lot of issues.
Really.
And I've never seen like a really good breakdown of the numbers, and it feels like the advocates for it are very gung-ho biased for nuclear without acknowledging any of the issues as being significant. Let's see so we did that one. Let's see. There was a response to you within the chat. Someone told me it's an ideology of a utopian society that focuses on highly self-disciplined individuals. Okay, so
yeah, I disagree with that.
Yeah. So any society that requires humans to all be perfect or better, obviously I think there's a cultural revolution component to any socialist or left-leaning transformation. But if that's what it requires, then we could just, society would already be better if that was possible. It's not humanity. We need to design society around humanity, not design humanity around society.
I like that. I might take that from you. Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I do not see it that way. Now, I should say that there is individualist anarchism as well. And I guess I'll make clear what I'm presenting is more in the tradition of what's called social anarchism. There's kind of a split in the history of anarchism where you've got individualist anarchism, largely starting with Stirner, and then you've got social anarchism, which really got its big start in Bakunin and Kropotkin and Malatesta and stuff. I'm not an individualist anarchist, which is to say I do not derive my principles from the individualists. The individualists often come to very similar conclusions, but they come to them in very different sorts of ways. So sometimes if you feel as if there's anarchists that are giving you two different kinds of answers, that's probably why. It's generally because there's individualist anarchists and there's social anarchists to a significant degree.
I mean, you also have straight up fascistic people calling themselves anarchists. They call themselves ANCAPs usually, right? And those people, yeah, they want everything the Republican Party says it wants: small government, and but a brute squad to enforce property and contract rights, right?
Right. Of course, yes. You got to keep the corporations in power. That's the most important part.
Well, that's your individual liberty, is to have a corporation.
Well, I should delineate that when I say individualist anarchists, I do not mean ANCAPs. I do not consider ANCAPs anarchists. I think they've just stolen the name. Individualist anarchists are socialists in generally. Some of them are not, but that is to say, they actually do want worker ownership of the means of production. Their argument for why they're anti-corporate, because corporations are imposing themselves over the individual, right? The corporation is an exploitative relationship that the individual should not be subjected to. So you end up with the pretty similar outcomes where you still don't want these hierarchies of power. You need to build a society where you diminish those hierarchies of power. But they come to it in a very different direction, and their rhetoric can sound very different, is what I'll tell you.
It'd be interesting to go through that sometime. Did you have another question? No. Let's look at the. Let's see. Okay, so there's that one. So abolish the national army and replace it with local militias. And again, this kind of idea can easily be co-opted by non-leftists. So they'll basically say things like, well, the local sheriff should really be the supreme power, right? And there's a big movement towards that right now of a lot of these militia groups basically saying that because they elect their sheriff, that's local control, therefore it's leftism, and why aren't you supporting lefty things? Oh, by the way, our local sheriff is a Nazi.
Well, this is once again this is thinking of representation as being able to represent control. And this is actually one of my problems with authoritarian leftists. Kind of what I was getting to earlier when I was talking about the republic. Authoritarian leftists are actually the ones who support using a republic to do these tasks. And I actually disagree with using the republic for the same reason as the example you just gave. Me electing a sheriff is not me having control. Okay, if that were the case, then we wouldn't have these problems with these local, lynch mobs, you might say, arising. Because in fact, once again, those people that are at risk of being, lynched or whatever, would have full control over their society in an anarchist society. So those militias would be under their control. Whereas if I just vote for a guy, that guy becomes a locus of failure. Okay. That representative becomes a failure point for the system. If he is racist, if he is bigoted in any given way, now we are all subjected to his will. Whereas in anarchism, everything is accountable because everything is horizontal. We didn't build anybody up to have power over us, so we can always hold everybody accountable horizontally, right? So to me, that's really not synonymous at all. But I could see how people would conceive, because the word militia is being used, that is somehow synonymous.
So I think a lot of times, I would be opposed to the republic form anyway. I mean, as I said, the closest thing I've found has been the Paracon system. So I guess I'm an anarcho-communist.
Sounds like it. Yeah. Keep on reading.
I like talking more. I as far as things can be more locally democratic as much as possible, I think that's a good way to go. I would just caution people to always be on the lookout for rat fuckers. Because they're everywhere and they are in every single and when people are like, oh well, progressive groups are just full of right wing of alt-right type people, or this group or that group, or every single group is full of them. Like we're all infiltrated. Anarchists, communists, Marxist-Leninists, and I guess the Marxist-Leninists. I would say, by the way, of the Marxist-Leninists, I think there's a lot of people that have good that are in good faith in that area, want to do good things. But the idea, any idea that you're going to transition from like this authoritarian republic type situation or dictatorship, and then later get the utopia, is not going to happen. The concentration of power will perpetuate itself until it's overthrown. And so I absolutely disagree with the whole Marxian theory of like I think I don't know if what he meant by
dictatorship of the proletariat. Is that what you're getting at?
Dictatorship of the proletariat. But I mean, if that actually was like what he meant by that was democracy of the people. Again,
he kind of did, I think, though, right? That's kind of the problem, is like they kind of just distorted him afterwards, like to the degree where, and I'll just comment on that quick, just because it's an interesting side note. Okay. Yeah. There's an entire thing that Marx wrote, which is a conspectus on Bakunin's state and or essentially one of Bakunin's biggest works, where he essentially goes through and explains, he's writing responses to Bakunin being like, no, I mean a society controlled directly by the proletariat. I mean that the society becomes the dictatorship. And like, he was like trying to, but it was just notes. Like we never saw those during the time of Marx. So then you get like Lenin and a bunch of other people really interpreting it as a true dictatorship of the proletariat. Right. And as you said, it power perpetuates itself. That's what
we the people of the United States don't control shit.
Exactly. Right.
All right. Sounds like the military junta took over Mini-Mart. That took over Mini-Mart.
I don't understand.
I don't know what this Mini-Mart example is about. I was just going to ask if he is with the Boogaloo. No, I don't think.
No. Boogaloo boys are mostly ANCAPs and crypto fascists. Yeah. I'm like literally their worst enemy.
Right. maybe I'm just brainwashed by the media to find the word militia triggering. Yeah, that's why I was bringing it up and we discussed it. But this was earlier, so I'll let's jump ahead a little bit to get some more of the. We'll work backwards a little bit.
So those are, no, I mean, like some of those were reasonable comments.
No, I'm sure it's from an honest place. JL's in here a lot. The Republicans threatened to filibuster, which is why the Democrats backed off and are going to. Okay, we're talking about electoral stuff right now, which I think matters. I suppose we should talk about that a little bit. So one of my big issues with a lot of the tendencies of the people in the anarchist space has been this insistence on expressing like this anti-electoralist position, like the anti-vote, like we're not going to vote kind of thing, right? That I just hear so much. And like, to my mind, this is my opinion, and I'm not sure exactly where you fall on this these days. But my opinion is, even if like voting for the lesser of evils is just a break on like right-wing extremism, you need that break as an anarchist to not get massacred. Like if you just like let the Republicans win long enough, I mean, in my opinion, that they'll literally round up anarchists, and they have all the electronic tools they need to find everyone now, and that doesn't work either, right? So, like, I'm in support of multiple tactics that are complementary. So you participate democratically to get as much as you can democratically. That doesn't mean that you have to spend all your time knocking on doors and making calls for politicians or giving your money to them. But it does, I think, mean voting, because it doesn't take long at all to vote. And then it means not telling other people not to vote. And then, and then organizing locally. And as you say, creating organizations that are a separate form of power, right? Which will exert another influence on the system and demonstrate the validity of something like any kind of leftist movement, which would endear that movement to the people over time and help lead to the kind of cultural changes you need to make it. But if you just let people like Trump stay in power and all these other Republicans, Ron DeSantis, long enough, like it's. When they complain about cancel culture, they complain that they're complaining about being like shamed. When they cancel the left, they're like literally putting them in prison or murdering them, right? So it's kind of like, to me, there's a lot on the line electorally, and so it just always bothers me to see that. And when I hear it, like I see a lot of the people in kind of the grifty kind of Jimmy Dore kind of space, like, yeah, you're right, we shouldn't participate democratically, and I see that a lot of support coming from the kind of shittier elements of the body politic. I don't know if you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think part of my perspective is influenced by the fact that I've been organizing since Occupy. And so I've seen I've seen some of the broader arc of what electoralism is and does and what actual protections it offers. And that is to say, Occupy was suppressed under Obama in both Democratic and Republican states, and in many cases in the Democratic states in the worst capacities of any that we saw. And the continuing of that case with like BLM, for example, where really some of the worst abuses we saw were not even in Republican states, they were in Democratic states. That's not to draw like some correlation to Democrats being worse. It's simply to suggest that the Democrats really are on that front, as far as suppression goes, do not appear to have much better of a record. But I would say, insofar as electoralism goes, my opposition is really not to whether you vote or not. I just don't. I'll leave my opinion to that about that aside for now. I don't care if you vote. I vote. Okay. It's not really to anarchists throughout history have voted. The problem is the other component you talked about, the extensive amount of time and effort spent behind the electoral project, spending time door knocking for candidates, spending time on the internet, telling people to go vote for XYZ, spending all of our time getting our minds completely trapped within the political sphere of the Republic, where the Republic just comes to define everything about how our conversations play out. And we are all talking about the games being played in the politics of the parliament, which we have very little actual influence over, when we could be talking about what the actual problems at hand are that need to be carried out. I'm not saying there's no aspect of walking and chewing bubblegum. What I'm trying to say is that you have to spend efforts in one place or another. And it seems to me voting, that's why anarchists have generally voted throughout history. Now, they've done vote strikes, but those are usually concerted vote strikes, okay? The argument that most anarchists have been making is your vote is easy, but all that other stuff you're doing is you wasting energy on the Republic. You should be spending all that effort building dual power, actually like trying to organize unions, promoting the politics and the theory and the radical consciousness that will be necessary to actually build the mass movement to begin with. Anarchists definitely look at everything from the bottom up, right? So what they're saying is, oh, you want your electoral project? Well, let me tell you, the best way to achieve it is not your electoral project. It is actually to build the mass movement, which will then make your electoral project actually able to do anything to begin with.
And right? I will say that electorally, one of the most powerful bodies that's ever existed, organizational types, are unions. So when you build up, now obviously there's a lot of issues with the corruption of unions and them endorsing shitty people lately, and some of the problems with the unions right now. But if you do a lot of organizing in unions, you're probably helping electoral politics as well, because they're going to say, hey, here's our list of people you should vote for. And those are going to generally be people that are pro-labor, as long as you have good control of your union, which means also it's not just about getting a union, but it's also about disciplining your union and keeping it accountable to its members, and not just letting it to become, the appendage of some bosses at the top that are corrupt. Did you have a question?
Yeah, it's a little different, I guess, what you guys are talking about, but like, where do you begin to like change a society to become more
I guess like where do you
begin?
Where do you interface with people that you can do these things with?
Or if you're a person that's interested in it and you want to get more involved, like, where do you start?
Because like if I go out on my street and I look for anarchists, I'm not going to find any.
Well, I mean, okay, so I'll first like pitch the work that I've written on this called Constructing the Revolution, which is me trying to answer that question. Basically, it's like laying out what the strategy is of this whole project, which has been published on Anarchist Library, but I also it's a video on my channel. If you want to go watch it, it tries to answer that question in a general sense. But I'll be even more practical. Okay, if you're listening to this and you're interested in actually getting involved in like anarchism, you should try to figure out what anarchist groups are in your area. And there are actually some that are generally very popular. People don't even know are anarchist. For example, Food Not Bombs is an explicitly anarchist organization. It's like mostly filled with anarchists. Like most places you go, Food Not Bombs is going to have a bunch of anarchists in it. Now, not only anarchists, but if you actually look at the platforms for these Food Not Bombs chapters, they're anarchist. So that's a really good place to meet anarchists.
Didn't the Food Not Bombs people, I've heard this, maybe you can confirm or deny, didn't the Food Not Bombs people have like some weird radical polycule thing going on in order to root out CIA infiltrators? Which I
haven't heard about that, but if so, power to them, guys. Like you,
that's the Food Not
being
Bombs
clever, I guess. If that works, I don't know how.
Like if we all sleep together, like nobody can be a CIA agent. And I think there's a major flaw in that logic. Like if I'm the CIA agent and I'm like, you mean I have to sleep with a bunch of these people? Okay. Like, I don't know if you've heard of law enforcement.
I don't think I've heard of this. Okay. This is new to me. This is new. I don't know. I'll tell you, that's not my Food Not Bombs chapter, but I'm interested to learn more about the Food Not Bombs chapters you're discussing here. But no, this is not a known tactic to me, using polycules in order to root out CIA agents. But
maybe it's like an extremist Trotskyist chapter of Food Not Bombs,
I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying I don't know anything about it. But Food Not Bombs is a great place to meet anarchists. IWW is generally a good place to meet anarchists. It's got a mixed constituency, but generally people are more libertarian socialist in IWW. And then, from there, like if you have a Black Rose near you, but might I also add, if you have a Symbiosis member group near you, they might be named all kinds of different things, but like they might have like Cooperation before their name. Like the one that I work with here is Cooperation Tulsa, but there's also Cooperation Jackson, which more people have heard of. It's a much more, known cooperation group. You've got Cooperation Plano, but you've also got a bunch of different ones. You got like Symbiosis, PDX, and you can go look up these organizations I've mentioned on the internet and see where their local orgs are. Most of these local orgs are going to be involved in, if it's IWW, it's going to be union building. But if it's pretty much anything else that I mentioned, it's going to be like food sovereignty, mutual aid, the building of dual power programs, cooperative networks, community land trusts, stuff like that. So that's the project of dual power building I'm talking about, but it involves a lot of different things because we have to construct a replacement society, right? Like we have to construct a replacement power structure. If we're going to say we're going to like undergo rupture with the previous structure, we can't like just leave the populace completely defenseless. We like actually have to develop the replacements that we will put in place so we won't have to seize the state and then accidentally become state actors and sabotage the revolution. So this project requires, this is what anarchists call prefiguration. And it's very important. I would recommend you find orgs that are doing the work and then push them towards doing even more prefiguration. Get involved, learn about anarchism, read theory, and so on.
Are you aware of, are there people trying to make economies through anarchism where are there like, hey, we have an anarchist company, and if you're an anarchist and you're interested, maybe come apply and we can all work together and make some money, provide for one another within an anarchist framework, similar to like a cooperative. Is that happening to any significant degree, or is that not realistic right now?
Cooperatives have been a very notable part of the modern anarchist movement. If one really thinks about it for just a few minutes, it's pretty obvious that a cooperative is a sort of economic representation of anarchism. If it can be structured that way, it should be said. So lots of anarchists try to establish cooperatives, and it should be said that Cooperation Jackson specifically is one that's like actually has built several cooperatives that are tied into like their community land trust and mutual aid distribution and all kinds of other stuff. So cooperatives are the economic component, like they're one of the most notable economic components. And then you've got all these other components that have to be put in place as well. Food sovereignty could involve planting community gardens and then getting the community involved through councils to manage the community gardens, things like that. We have to start in these small ways to build up. Cooperation Jackson is built up pretty significantly at this point. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Like find the groups that are close to you that are either explicitly anarchist groups or have a significant anarchist constituency. Get to know actual people on the ground. If one doesn't exist, make one. Literally all you need is just a few other people. Just 2 or 3 people can become an organizing group. The Cooperation Tulsa that I'm working with right now, we started as 3 people. It's like you don't need to start at 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever in order to get started. You just need to find people who are interested in doing the necessary work and who will, stick with you through this process of trying to do the necessary work. So yeah, that's what I recommend as per the answer to that question in a more practical sense.
And I would say if you're going to try to organize people into a cooperative effort, assuming it's not immediately going to make a bunch of money, probably want to set some kind of like minimum work to be put in every week or month, right? So that it can get going, because otherwise you can just end up kind of waiting for that and nothing happens. But I did want to ask you yes or no, because we don't have any time to discuss it. Would your vision of anarcho-communism allow for wealthy people to exist or people to accumulate wealth or concentrations of lasting power like, this is my land and you can't take it, right? That kind of thing.
I think that's too complicated to answer, but I guess the short answer is no, but kind of the answer is also a little bit yes, because people are always going to accumulate a little bit different amounts from one another. There's no way to actually prevent that, but that doesn't mean that power necessarily has to be imbued behind it. Like that's the idea, is to try to structure out the power relations of that as much as possible, and to prevent the accumulation of assets by distribution based on need. So prioritizing need first. And I guess if somebody just wants, then maybe they can have some extra, like, but the people who need, that's the first priority.
Right. I guess my question would be like, do you allow people to basically become multimillionaires? I mean, some versions of this say that you can't have money.
I was about to say, it presumes there's money. Most anarcho-communism.
But even if you don't have money, you can have the things that represent money. You could have 500 head of cattle, or a fleet of 500 cars in your
sure,
right, and that would still be economic power, obviously, and similar thing. And would you allow the society to basically single out a class of people and say, you guys have figured out a way somehow to get too much, and just take it away, basically?
I think part of it is just answering the question, how did they accumulate it, right? Like, did they, like, think about it this way. I
think you also need like a safety brake, right? To just be able to say, we can pull this lever whenever we want. You're not entitled to having
everything is controlled by council. So of course you guys could all just vote to expropriate that guy next door, right? Like, that's something that could be done, but it's like, that's sort of an extreme measure. The key is to build a society where concentration of power doesn't become a problem to begin with, right? You're trying to construct society such that it reduces the power hierarchies and reduces the risks that they will arise as well. So I would say the answer to that question is actually really complicated, and I've talked with people about it for literally like hours before. So, but that's my more general answer, is you're never going to be able to prevent it completely, but you want to build a society that tries to prevent it as much as conceivably possible. And if things go wrong at the end of the day, hierarchies of power the opposition to hierarchies of power is built into the fundamental, rule set of anarchism. And therefore, it's a very good demonstration of a concentration of power, and probably would be countervailed by democratic consensus. But it's a very complicated question to answer,
Well, I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah, it's something I feel like it's a core component of answering the question of what this actually is, and giving people a picture and something to grapple over. Do you have any final questions? Because we're out of time.
No, very, very cool conversation though. Learned a lot.
Well, it's good talking with you again, Daniel. Links down in the description below to Daniel's Twitter, his YouTube channel, and his Patreon. Remember, someone having a Patreon is not what makes them a grifter. Them being a grifter is what makes them a grifter. Okay. So we do need to support one another. And, if you're going to give money to candidates, at least you could give money to people that are in good faith trying to make the world a better place. And I think Daniel's clearly one of those folks. So please support him if you can. And subscribe to his channel. That helps too. And we'll catch you next time. It's been Nial and Caja, Dirty Left Feet.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
Thank you.